I think, let me try and check with Beerud on one small point. I mean, it's interesting perspective when you come across from a strongly non-voice revenue stream from telecommunication into a little bit more of philanthropy or more of CSR or kind of a non-funded initiatives, then moving towards the sustainability. How do you see this across, and how do you see this growing, especially on the education side?
I think mobile is the only medium that can reach literally every user, in the every mobile subscriber in the country, and education is a mass market product. It needs to reach every user. So the marriage of education and mobile is just perfect. And I think all the applications that we reviewed and so on, there are numerous instances where people are leveraging mobile to deliver content. So there's it's truly exciting. I think it's for the first time that you even have the possibility to teach every Indian student, which if you think about it, I mean, the education challenge in India is so massive. And I think for the first time we have a platform or a set of solutions that can scale to the size of the problem, okay, as opposed to just setting up a few schools here and there, which are very point solutions. I think these are very mass solutions. So to see a lot of this emergence is just amazing. It's very exciting. I think it just the entrepreneurs have, I mean, the applicants have done some amazing things, and there's a lot of potential beyond here as well. I mean, like say in the Nokia Pearson project, it was interesting that you go from the small screen to the big screen. I mean, the moment you do that, it becomes a very shared experience where all the students can enjoy that experience as opposed to just individual people using it. And I think there's many other creative uses. So I think the opportunities are endless.
The notion of sustainability versus scale, right, are at some level getting treated as conflicting goals, and that makes me feel extremely uncomfortable. Right? Because when entrepreneurs come in and pitch to us for for-profit businesses, they still want scale. They want scale of revenue, profits, and so on and so forth. You can't get there unless you've got scale of consumer base and hence some scale of impact. When I see some of this, sometimes the definition of sustainability is, I'm not going to fund it after a particular point in time, but let the government of India fund it after that time. Right? To me, that's a little bit of a confused notion of what's sustainable. It's someone else giving the grant instead of me giving the grant, right? So the question that I wonder about is, in a country where even primary education is predominantly privately funded, and India is one of the few countries where that is true, right? Why aren't schools and parents and kids willing to pay for it if it delivers such great value, right? And that's the part that I struggle with. And to me, the notion of sustainability is, if the customer is willing to pay for their kids' education, they have to be willing to pay for this.
Yeah, I tend to agree, and we have a little bit of a time, and we just have two presentations. So that's the reason I'm trying to even point this across to you to say that in India, if you look at after the basic necessity, education is an area where every parent would necessarily invest very, very heavily. And from that perspective, I find, and I also have not come across any solutions or any programs which have been extremely revenue generating or self-sustaining, if I can use that word across. So what steps potentially could these guys do in terms of actually making these projects sustainable?
So I don't quite buy the fact that there are no programs which are generating revenue and profits, right? At some level, IT in schools, which is a big initiative now, both in public and private sector, is a self funding mechanism, right? There's no reason why mobile can't be. So I think there is an opportunity to do that, and in fact, you might get more scalable outcomes if you do that, right? Because that has implications on what talent can you bring in. That has implications on what kind of innovation can you trigger in the ecosystem, and hence what the quality of solutions that eventually comes out. So to me, that's a definite possibility. I can understand the funding gap because it might take someone 2 or 3 or 4 years to prove the impact. And customers might not be willing to pay till they can, see that impact being demonstrated. So I understand the funding gap, but to me, the notion of sustainability and linked to it is the notion of scale has to be to get beyond, someone writing a check for someone else and people saying, I'm willing to write a check for my kids or myself.
But look, if I can just throw in a contrarian thought here, right? Education is one of the few spaces where revenue-producing potential is not necessarily going to matter for sustainability. And look, if you're doing an e-commerce company, yes, you need to be profitable because you're giving out things that are expensive, right? You can't fund it forever. Education is very, very content intensive, where the marginal cost of delivering content is zero. Okay, and it's safe to say everyone's going to have mobile devices. It's also safe to say over the next 1-2 years, data plans are going to become ubiquitous. So delivery of content, so that's just the platform, that's the landscape. And then when apps like these create a ton of content, and that becomes cheaply and easily available, I mean, like Khan Academy, even on the web, think about it, right? There aren't successful revenue-producing models, but no one would dispute the fact that internet has transformed education. Everyone goes to Wikipedia, everyone goes, I mean, simply by making content available for free, it transforms education. And I think if that's what's really amazing here. Khan Academy is a great example. They don't make any money, but anyone who has kids here, I'm sure, they use it. So the transformational impact of education, even without, and I'm absolutely for profit. I run a for-profit company and so on. So I think, yes, it has to happen, but even without that, I think you'll see the magic of education on mobile can still have substantial impact and transform India, leaving aside the business models that will inevitably follow, and I'm sure some entrepreneurs will figure it out. But I think just simply let there be tons of content, let everyone have access to it. That's the miracle. Okay, Indian kids in rural villages didn't have access to books, didn't have access to teachers, didn't have access to content, and suddenly they do. And isn't that in itself the miracle of it?
Yeah, so all that is great. The part that I get concerned about is sustainability, right? As long as it's dependent on someone's whim to write a check today, for the rest of the world, to me the sustainability piece is missing. As soon as sustainability is missing, innovation and talent is missing, right? So I worry about that chain of saying, today, sure, these are great initiatives, that bringing something to the table where nothing existed, right? For one of these to, get into mass deployment mode where you can rely on these things to service me today and service me 5 years from now, I can't be dependent on someone's ability to write a check for me.
I have two very interesting people sitting in this room. I just observed them across. One is Tommy there. Tommy, you could raise your hand. And I have Peter also here. Peter, you could raise your hand. I have questions for you, but I'll first give it to the lady who just raised her hand to ask a question. I don't know what she had in mind. Can you get one more mic, please? It's okay, yeah, you have loud voice enough, okay.
And so I was working with Bain for a while, and now I've just moved on from there into ICT and education, and I'm working with a similar company who is working on content, but the market is low-income and government schools. So what we do is set up hotspots there and take your Khan Academy there offline to these kids. But to your point, so why I mentioned my background is because I see eye to eye with you on the whole sustainability front, which goes hand to hand.
Yeah, I want to challenge that a little bit. In spite of the fact that mostly what we fund is for profit, I've got a personal interest in non-profit education. So, I've seen very poor parents pay 200 rupees for a private school, primary, for their kids when there's a government school standing next to it, right? And this is not exceptions. The 200 rupee private school for primary kids is a roaring business in India. It's completely disorganized. What that illustrates to me is the propensity of these parents to pay for it.
So that's again another interesting point, because if you go back to the low-income schools market, you'll see that none of these schools are breaking even. None of these schools are breaking even. They're all in operational losses. So, yeah.
I think we can have this discussion also. So, Tommy, your global view on how education has been either made sustainable or how you see across when you travel all around the 55 countries that you have traveled. You have a view on that? I think the team here. And I don't think you need a mic, so
I have a very different view. I'm very worried, and I dislike discussions like this very much, because as each of us in this room is very individual, so diverse is learning. And there's always the problem that people think that there's one solution for kindergarten, the same solution for then grade school, high school, university, and then somebody really smart gets up and says, yes, but we have lifelong learning. And people who are 40 or 50 years old, they have to have the same e-learning solution. I think we should forget that. Go back to the drawing board and don't think about the technology, but think about the individuals, the person. Think about the learning. Think about not the pedagogy, how to teach somebody, but what is the learning process. And then become humble and smart. Don't try to do everything. There are various different kind of learning objectives. There's a learning objective in terms of how to be respectful in an intercultural communication. Why on earth do I think I have to have a little video on my phone in order to learn this, rather than to listening to you and to appreciate the feedback you're giving me? However, if I want to use this mobile phone to repeat over and over again something which is basic information which I have to get out of a database or out of a book, out of a manual into my head, the phone is helping me with repetition learning and with memorization. That's what I would call a good use. If I have learning cards, I can put the learning card on here that fits it. I will not have a video stream on it. I will not use bandwidth, but it's very small. I can use it and I can repeat it and do it like this. Microlearning, for instance, is an approach which fits this memorization. The last thing is, any kind of education with technology has to submit to a managerial imperative. And that is, you need to be able to measure the advantage, not the impact, the advantage of technology over using not technology or using something else. You will never know what is the opportunity cost of deploying something like this unless you put it next to something else and you measure it. So I appreciate what you did because you're trying to do this. Forget educational experiments which do not have clear objectives, clear metrics, clear evaluation, and then sharing it among the responsible people. Last thought. These technologies, and in India, are revolutionary for one more than additional thing, which is it turns around the hierarchy in terms of teaching and learning. Tommy Ahonen and I have gray hair. And it was a time when gray hair meant that you accumulated enough knowledge that you would become a wise person. If you listen to him and me, you don't know, very sure that you're not. However, with these technologies, young people, you can teach me maybe as much as I can teach you. I can learn from you. We can learn from each other. And that is the real opportunity. The real opportunity is to give dignity and respect to people because they are becoming autonomous in terms of information acquisition and knowledge buildup. And that way we can share, and I would call this a good future for learning. Thank you.
Thank you. I was a bit deliberate in trying to take this break between two different sets of presentations, more coming from funded